GTA 5 has approximately 36 million lines of code and took more or less 3 years to develop, and every other decent game nowadays takes at least a few 100,000 lines of code. Now what if we try to make a game with no lines of code at all? I mean, it can't be that difficult, right? Oh yeah, and we have 24 hours to finish it, cause we definitely need to go out and touch some grass finally. Let's make the graphics first. We decided to remake the classic game of Snake. So what we're gonna need is a snake and a point to eat, which will be an apple in our version, inspired by the Google version of Snake that probably all of us have played at least once. Good old times. We quickly whipped up the parts we need for the game, and I don't know about you, but the snake we drew has a lot more personality than the original 8-bit one. Although our version looks more like a worm than a snake. You can see we actually drew every part of the snake in individual pieces. So the head of the snake, the body, turning left, turning right, and the end of the snake. That is because the size of the snake actually changes during the game. And of course we have the apple. Everything has a slight glow as well to make it a bit more aesthetic. Now let's talk about how we're actually going to make the game with no lines of code. Unity has something called visual scripting, which is based on connecting visual nodes together, kind of like building blocks. Instead of declaring a variable by, writing code, you can just create a node that defines your variable and connect them to some other nodes. You could also call it Scratch, but a little bit fancier. Before we get any hate comments, we know that the Unity engine itself actually requires quite a few lines of code, so the video is technically a lie, but give us a break, dude. Now let's stop wasting time and begin working. The first step we did was trying to create the movement of the head. So every time you press D, for example, the head should turn right and move in that direction. You can see that we just added a node for every keyboard input and connected them to a variable that sets the head to its new position. Next up, we wanted to add the feeling of an old arcade game mixed with some better graphics. So we decided to add a timer with a delay. That means the snake actually can't move every frame, but instead moves every second. Which turns out to be a horrible idea, but you'll see soon. Let's try it out. Yeah, I don't think he'll be doing anything soon. We quickly fixed that problem. It does look a bit funky because he can't actually visibly move his head in different directions yet, but he can at least move around the map. Now there's one thing to pay attention to. In Snake you can't just move your head to the opposite position all of a sudden, because your body is obviously in the way. So we had to implement that feature as well. By throwing a few nodes together and connecting some things, we also added the apple into the game. So our little snake head can actually get some points now. You can see we have the object apple, and if you actually get into its trigger zone, the variable score will change, meaning you'll get a point added. He doesn't quite eat the apple in the center of his face, but that's because he's a little special. The code, or better said the nodes, are getting just a tiny bit messy, but as a heads up, this looks like heaven compared to how it looks in the end. The next thing we need to add is the body part that gets added every time you eat an apple. I mean, that's the whole point of Snake, right? Getting so long that you at one point just begin to run into your own body and lose the game. Or you're one of those kids that spends 8 hours a day grinding Snake to beat the world record. Like, respectfully, do something else. There's so much stuff in this world to explore and experience. You've got so much time on your hands. Talking about time, I think this is gonna be closer than initially thought. So we quickly began to work again. But right now the new body segment only spawns in the middle of the screen. What we did to fix that is that we added another script to the body, so it also moves alongside with the head of the snake. It works by storing the last position of the head, and once the head actually moves to a new position, the body segment just moves to the place where the head was. Looks promising, right? Yeah, there are still some visual things we need to work on. It mostly works now with the first body part, but kind of struggles once there's an addition to the family, as you can obviously see. Or you were just not paying attention scrolling through the comments. Anyways, we fixed that by just repeating the previous mentioned storing system, but instead of storing the position of the head, it just stores the last position of the last body part of the snake. And you can now have the longest cursed worm snake creation ever. It does look alright sometimes though, so that's good I guess. Now we finally sat down and quickly added the head rotation, which wasn't really hard to do. The body parts still don't move with the head direction, but that's the next thing we're tackling. By the way, if you want to actually get into game development or coding in general, you can go ahead and click the first link in the description. We've got a free guide for you on how to start. You don't have to, but check it out if you want. Alright, it kind of works now. It looks like there's bacon between the head and the end of the snake, so that needs some fixing as well. Now this is the first time using this visual scripting thing, so we spent the next 2 hours trying to figure out this weird Unity animator blend tree stuff, while clearly not having any clue what to do. The slight panic is setting in, and the timer isn't really helping either. We maybe should have watched a few more tutorials instead of just following this guy, but here we are. We finally did manage to make it work though. Our snake can now finally eat his apples and actually get longer, and it doesn't seem that cursed. Remember when I said that the time delay thing with the head only updating every second wasn't a good idea? Yeah, I think you can see why now. But you get used to it, so it's fine. And as a little update, you might know what we meant with this stuff is getting messy. Let's just ignore the mess we created and switch to making a beautiful never mind. An okay looking UI. Slap on a counter with some nice glow to it. Apple next to the counter so you know how many apples you've eaten. Make it green because why not? And add a nice drop shadow to the apple. We're so goddamn close, I can already smell the grass. We've got this cool looking red bar. Okay, we had 24 hours, alright. This won't be a Picasso piece. And if you die, you get a high score, of course. This whole UI thing is pretty basic, right? Every game basically has a high score counter and the counter of your current points. But this alone looks like this. Crazy, I know. After some sweat, tears, broken keyboards and broken minds, the game is working. And that's it. We actually did it in time and we can finally touch some grass now. While we're enjoying the grass, you can watch this video where we made another game.